Good evening and welcome to our program tonight, A Home Away from Home, Incorporating Indigenous Design at Western University. My name is Joanna and I'm a librarian here at London Public Library. I'd like to start with a quick introduction of our guests. So just gonna do something quick here while we have all these wonderful, all right. So I'll just ask them to give a wave as I say their names, and then we're going to meet them a little bit later. So my co-host tonight is Sandra Miller, if you want to give a wave. And our guests tonight are Wanda Dalla Costa, Tierra Miller, and Paula Cornelius-Hedgepeth. So if you could all just give a wave, and we will have a chat a little bit later. So Wanda will be sharing her thoughts after I offer a recognition of tomorrow, September 30th, and then we'll have a chance to meet our guests and hear from them and open up the session to your questions. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that tomorrow in Canada is the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to honor the lost children and survivors of residential schools, their families and communities. Public commemoration of this history and the ongoing impacts of residential schools is an important part of the reconciliation process. We invite you to read the 94 Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. I will be including this link in the chat and to reflect on your acts of allyship with Indigenous communities. Thank you for reflecting on this acknowledgement. And I will now ask Wanda to share her thoughts on this.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. It's wonderful to hear all of the bells ringing with all of the people interested in this subject. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And I share at the beginning, and I've done this before, where I've heard a critique about acknowledgements being meaningless or being shallow, that, you know, how by repeating the acknowledgements, you lose the impact, you lose the power of what they were intended for. And I heard someone else talk about action. Where is our action behind those acknowledgements? And I think this is what is so fantastic about today, because we're not only acknowledging the people of this place and all the other wonderful places that are on our beautiful Turtle Island, but we're also here to show action in terms of reconciliation. And so we're bringing you the work that we've done. We're having an open conversation. And I hope that we get a lot of questions and comments. This is a living subject and it is in its infancy right now, the subject of Indigenous design. So we welcome all of you here to bring your inquiry to the end of this presentation and help us make this an action-filled day today. So thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. So I'll add that link to the chat momentarily, but I want to say for our program tonight, the library is happy to be part of this 10th anniversary of our MidMod Movies series. And we've been partnering with Forest City Modern on that. And I'm going to introduce you to Sandra in that regard. But a few things I want to mention. Again, if you want to ask a question at any time tonight, please just put it in the chat. If you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, it's that speech bubble with chat underneath. Click on that. It'll open up the little box there and you can start typing either directly to me or to everyone as you wish. And we'll get to your questions in the question and answer period. So I'm going to introduce Sandra Miller, the founder and administrator of the Forest City Modern Facebook group. She's a member of the Urban League of London, Centre of New Urbanism and Strong Towns. She's a former board member of the Architectural Conservancy Ontario London region, an architectural researcher and a librarian. This is her 10th year co-hosting the MidMod Movies film series with London Public Library, including this last event in our series tonight. So Sandra, I'll hand it over to you. Oh, I think you're muted. Shall I unmute you?
Here we are.
Oh, there we go.
It's always the technology.
Yes.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you and welcome everyone. This is really exciting. This is my first live Zoom co-hosting, so please be patient with me. Really excited to do this 10th season. It's hard to believe we've made it through 10 seasons and what a season it's been. We're still in COVID chaos. We were really pleased to be able to offer this type of innovative programming this year. Last year, we were all online only through Canopy. And so this year we've had a couple of outdoor film screenings. And tonight we're doing this Zoom presentation talk with these amazing guests. Huge thank you to the library for co-hosting this series for 10 years. And especially to Joanna, who you've heard speaking. She is an awesome partner. She has leapt over tall buildings, so to speak, to make this year's MidMod Movies happen. And I'm really feel very blessed to be working with her. So the Forest City Modern Facebook group was created 10 years ago out of pure self-indulgence, because I was interested in modernist architecture. And I thought, well, I can't be the only one. So lo and behold, here we are. There's, I think, over 300 people in the Facebook group now. One of the goals is to raise awareness and celebrate local modernist and contemporary architecture in the City of London and the Southwestern Ontario region. So everyone is welcome. You don't have to be an architect or a high-end collector or anything. Look us up on Facebook and ask to join the group. Everyone is welcome. So this evening, we're going to learn about one of Western University's iconic buildings and the new life that it's taking on as the Indigenous Learning Centre. The John G. Althouse building was designed by London architects Howard Hicks and Victor Marsh, and it was officially opened in 1966. It's an interesting building because it's kind of a hybrid. It's very traditional in its materials and the use of forms, things like courtyards, which is, as we know, the collegiate Gothic style. Most of the buildings on campus built in the 19th and early 20th century use those forms. But the architects gave Althouse a real modernist flair through the architectural details and the space planning that they used, and especially, of course, in its iconic spaceship library. The urban legend has long held that the circular library was inspired by a round residence, a private home that was built several years earlier on nearby Western Road. And the architects apparently visited the home asking the owners about its design and construction before the new education building was even constructed. So unfortunately, that unique home was destroyed a number of years ago, ironically, to build a very traditional looking red brick apartment building, which is mostly, I believe, students occupied now. So tonight we will learn from Wanda and Tierra and Paula about Indigenous design at Western, and I'm going to pass it back to Joanna.
Thank you, Sandra. That's great. Right. So right now, I'd like to invite Paula, Wanda, and Tierra to join me in answering a few questions so we can get to know you. So I'm just going to do a quick thing here so that we can see you. All right, we've got it. Almost there. Great. Okay, perfect. So welcome, everyone. So we're going to start with Paula tonight. So Paula, thank you for joining us. I want to start with all our guests tonight by sharing where they're joining us from tonight as a way to acknowledge the land and connect us in this virtual environment. Can you share where you are tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here and to be invited to be part of this panel to speak and share the journey that has been, that we've been on, I guess, to create and design. And eventually we're building right now in the process of this new Indigenous learning space. So very exciting. I am coming to you right now from Oneida Nation of the Thames. So this is my home and territory of my ancestors for hundreds of years, whether in sustenance or settlement, as solidified by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant. So we share this, this space, I guess, immediate space with two other First Nations, Chippewa of the Thames and Munsee Delaware of the Thames. This land, Southwestern Ontario, was a shared space between many nations. And yeah, so that's where I am right now.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, so you work at Western University in the Office of Indigenous Initiatives as the Community Relations and Space Coordinator. Can you share some of the ways that the university is working with Indigenous communities?
Sure. So there are many, many ways. I don't think that there aren't too many things that we do not involve, engage, or engage with our Indigenous communities, whether it's inside Western or our local communities surrounding us. I can speak to, I guess, the projects that I lead or have a big part in. So one of the things, or a couple of the things, would be IPEC, which is our Indigenous Post-Secondary Education Council, our Indigenous Faculty Advisory Council. So those two committees and councils are advisory groups for Western University and for the Office of Indigenous Initiatives. So those two groups kind of guide us in our decision-making and how we implement programs and projects here at Western. So both committees are Indigenous and also involve local communities. We also have language revitalization project pilot program that's just starting, and that involved a lot of community engagement and determining what exactly they wanted to see in terms of language revitalization here at Western. We do a language translation program. Language is very important to our Indigenous communities, and we want to be able to offer it here at Western so that our communities can engage in learning and being able to revitalize, I guess, the languages here. So those two programs are currently running. We also have an Indigenous Gonfalon project. So the goal at Western is to indigenize and decolonize as much as possible. So there's many different aspects that we take part in. So the Indigenous Gonfalon is, I don't know if you're familiar with the Gonfalon, but those are like the banners that they carry in during convocation ceremonies for our graduates. So we were approached and asked if we would create something that represents our Indigenous students and our communities. So we engaged with Indigenous communities and our students here at campus to see what they wanted that Gonfalon to look like and how they wanted to be represented. So that's something that's currently in the works. And let's see what else we're working on in Indigenous alumni chapter here at Western. And so that's going to be involving all of our Indigenous communities throughout Turtle Island. There are many alumni, Indigenous alumni that have been to Western that are all over. So we're currently working on trying to gather as many as we can to join our Indigenous alumni chapter. We have our Visiting Elders program, and that involves our elders throughout the surrounding communities as well that come to campus. They offer supports to our students, and they offer Indigenous ways of being and knowing and teachings to our staff and our faculty. They come and they offer teachings or their perspectives, the knowledges that they carry to our, they'll come and do class presentations. They might just offer support, emotional supports, a lot of different ways that they contribute to the university. We also have, my colleague and I have created a digital platform called Indigenous Voices, where we reach out to our communities, our knowledge holders, our elders, our storytellers, and we create themes every month. We host an Indigenous Voices once a month, and our themes vary from month to month, depending on the season, depending on what's going on in our communities around us, what's going on in Canada at the time. So that's another way that we engage our communities. And this Indigenous Voices was born from COVID because we wanted to still have a way to reach our communities and still bring our Indigenous knowledges into Western. So that's been very successful and far-reaching. So that's a wonderful thing. We've had Indigenous people from as far as Africa in joining us for this program. So happy about that one. And I mean, I could keep going. My programs are, it's community relations. So everything that I do has a community engagement element to it, but that's just speaking for my role. Sarah May Chitty is our curriculum pedagogy officer. So she does a lot of curriculum and reaching out to community as well to bring in those knowledge keepers and those teachers. So many things, like I said, there is not one thing that we do here at Western that does not involve our Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Paula. And we'll definitely hear more as you share more about the project that we're focusing on tonight. So thank you so much. And so now we'll turn to Wanda. So Wanda, can you start with sharing where you're joining us from tonight?
I sure can. I am coming to you from the traditional territory of the Akimel, Odhem, and Peeposh people. I am in Phoenix, Arizona, where I teach at Arizona State University, and I run the Indigenous Design Collaborative here at the school.
Great, thank you, Wanda. And so can you tell us a bit about the Indigenous Design Collaborative and what it is?
Yeah, it's a research center that I founded when I came here in 2016, and it was because I had found that in architecture schools they don't teach you about how to work inside community, and there's a lot of protocols, there's a lot of consensus-based decision making, there's a lot of knowledge to gather, and I found that our architecture schools just were really not honing in on all of the potential of this field. And so I talk about the IDC that it increases understanding, it increases inclusiveness, and particularly it increases accuracy in the field. Instead of us guessing from old sources and books that come, that might have misinformation in them, I always say to our students, let's just go to the source, let's go to the community, let's ask them, get their voices in. And what we're really trying to do is illuminate under-examined and undervalued Indigenous perspectives and value systems into architecture. And I think for me, there's a potential, because of our 7 generations worldview, our ability to connect with all of the land family, person to person, but also to the animals and to nature. I think there's a beautiful potential to incite global transformation through this field. So that's what makes me most excited about leading the IDC. And I get to meet people like Tierra Miller, who come and study there. And then we convince them to come and work for us and do research for years and years. So thanks. Great question.
Thanks, Wanda. And well, let's move to Tierra then and meet her. So Tierra, you've worked with Wanda at the Architecture Collective, TWOW, and for the last 2 years, specializing in Indigenous engagement and place-based design. Can you tell us what that means? But please start with telling us where you are tonight.
Well, it's nice meeting everyone. My name is Sandra Miller. I'm Navajo from the Navajo Nation within Arizona, but I'm currently in New Mexico, which is at a border town of the reservation. Going back to your question, Joanna, Indigenous engagement is co-collaborating with elders, knowledge brokers, and working with the people of the place through engagement activities and feedback along the design process. Whereas place-based design is designing within that place and looking at the geography, sacred sites within that area, as well as even going back to cardinal directions or celestial alignments. It really relates back to working with that place and the natural environment around it, along with the people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now that we've had a chance to hear from all of you, what I'm going to do is invite Paula to start this evening by sharing her talk on this new space at Western. So I'm just going to change the screen a bit and I'll welcome Paula to share her screen when she's ready.
Okay. Everybody see that okay?
Looks great.
Yep.
Okay, let's go here. So I am going to just share a little bit with you about the Indigenous Learning Space. So the Indigenous Learning Space was born from the Indigenous Strategic Plan here at Western, which again came about because of community engagement. One of the things that Western strives to work towards is reconciliation, decolonization, and indigenization. So I've just included some, I guess, definitions of what it means to Western to do this work. And mainly, I think that indigenization is just ongoing process of restoring Indigenous ways of knowing and being. So when it comes to the Indigenous learning space, I think that it totally represents and symbolizes the indigenization of spaces at Western, particularly the design elements that we have coming into this space. And when we think about the community engagement, there were certain elements that our community wanted to see within this building. They wanted a certain feel, they wanted cultural elements present here. So the indigenization at Western, it involves many different aspects, but particularly when we're talking about the space, it's about space planning, creating that space within Western for our Indigenous communities, our Indigenous staff, our faculty, our students. So going back to the beginning of where this space originated from. So it started with the Indigenous Strategic Plan, and in 2018 and 19, Western appointed a special advisor, Candace Brunette, who led the community engagement process. When I came on board to Western, I was coming from Windsor. The process had already been started. There was already a lot of work that had been done by Candace Brunette and her team. And I kind of jumped on board to help her move things along as well. So it was a very exciting time. The building had already been selected and the work had already begun. And but there was still some work to be done. So there was a lot of focus groups, community engagement that was still happening. And that was the point at which I started. So I got to be there and listen to the community and hear exactly what they wanted. What they wanted for this space. So I think Wanda's probably going to talk about that some more, but there were a lot of different things. So it was community from the local nations. It was community from the urban community. So there's a lot of Indigenous people within London that are going to be utilizing this space, Indigenous organizations that we want to invite to use this space, our Indigenous faculty, our non-Indigenous faculty. This space is meant to be a home and a hub for Indigenous learning and sharing our knowledges, our pedagogy, our ways of being and knowing. So with that in mind, there were some things that were identified as high level and functional needs from our community members. So we wanted it to be a central and visible location on campus. And obviously, I think we've achieved that. That building I am an alumni of Western, and I studied at the Faculty of Education. So seeing that building for the first time, it's quite a remarkable building. It's very unique, I guess you could say, in its circular structure. And I unfortunately didn't have a whole lot of time to spend there because my course at the time was part-time, or I was working at the same time. So we were only there on weekends, and unfortunately the library wasn't open when we were there. But so that was one of the goals, was to find someplace central and visible. We also wanted to reflect our Indigenous cultures. We want certain things that we wanted to be able to do freely, like smudging. We wanted to have a large gathering space, which the main floor of that building is very accommodating, 150 to 200 people. We have a bookable classroom down in the bottom in the basement floor, and an outdoor ceremonial space. And then it had to be functional for our staff, so office and meeting spaces as well. So we definitely achieved those goals with this space. So the vision for it was, we want it to be a home place. We want it to call to students. We want it to call to community and faculty and staff as a place to come and just be, to feel comfortable in. We want it to feel like a second home for our students. So we also do have the Indigenous Student Center on campus, and we find that sometimes that's just not enough space for our needs. So we definitely needed something bigger. So this space is going to, like I mentioned before, it's going to help support and advance Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous pedagogies. It's going to be a touchstone, a place to host events, a place to invite people to celebrate our cultures, to celebrate our indigeneity and our identities. And it's also going to be a place just to connect, to network, to come together. For everybody who shares a common interest of advancing Indigenous decolonization and reconciliation. But mostly it's just, we want to make sure that we foster a sense of community within Western and with our communities. So part of my role as community relations and space coordinator, I will be responsible for this space as far as programming and events and managing right now. So my goal is to make it a community hub, to make sure that this is a place that people want to utilize. So we have existing programs that are going to be housed within this space. So our elders and residents, or our elders council, this is going to be their main space where they are going to reside. And so that's cultural programming, our land-based knowledge sharing and interactive activities and learning. So we've started virtual programming, and I think that that's probably going to keep going because it's so successful and it reaches so many people. But at the same time, also inviting people into this space as well. I think the one thing that I'm really excited about is the Indigenous Medicine Garden. It's just from the renderings, it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I just can't wait to actually see it when it's in full bloom and we're out there picking medicines and having classes and sharing that space with students and community, and inviting our community members who are very knowledgeable around medicines to help us to create this space as well, to suggest and recommend medicines that would thrive in this area, how to utilize them, how to harvest them, how to take care of them. In our Indigenous ways of being and knowing, our plants are, vital and important to us, and they take care of us. We take care of each other. So having this space here is going to be one of the key, I think, focus areas, and something that's going to attract many, many people. So other things that we would be doing there is hosting special events and speakers. So Indigenous guest speakers. We have right now, we bring in many guest speakers to campus. This is the place where we would hope that we would be hosting such events. Like I said, we can host 150 to 200 people in this space. So inviting people, we've recently had some speakers like Marie Batiste and I can't even think of the other ones, but there's so many Indigenous speakers that we've had recently, but having those types of speakers come in and our Indigenous community members as well to share their knowledge So even like Indigenous voices, if we were able to bring people in person and then kind of broadcast it out virtually, those so many options of utilizing this space. We're also going to have community gatherings, so feasts, socials, round dances, workshops, all of those different things, just bringing community and making the space feel like home for our students. So many of our indigenous students are coming from far away. They're coming away from their home communities, and we want them to be able to come to Western and know that there's going to be this space here for them where they can come and feast, share feast with us, share food with us, come and have socials where we can sing and we can dance and learn about our cultural and Indigenous ways of being and knowing. Sharing workshops, inviting our artists, Indigenous artists into this space as well, and sharing their knowledge with our students and our communities. And I think one of the other most important things one of the things that I am definitely going to strive towards is making this space an Indigenous language hub. Our Indigenous languages are vital to our cultural ways of being. Our culture is embedded in our languages. And speaking for my nation, we only have 33 fluent speakers left. And the need for revitalization is critical. We're at a critical point right now. So I want to work towards, making this space like a language hub as well, offering languages out of this space, bringing in the speakers that we do have, and making programs. Immersion, I don't know if we can do immersion, probably not in this space, but somehow utilizing the space and making it into a language hub. So I also just wanted to provide some construction updates. So I was just there last week, and I got to see where we're at in the construction process. And right now it's totally gutted, which is exciting. So I'm just going to take you on a little construction tour. So this is the lobby area. And if anybody is familiar with the library before, this would have been the area where you walked in, and their office space was right here. So this is going to be when you walk in, you're going to see the reception area right here. And there's going to be a kitchen and some office spaces, and off to the right is going to be office space here. But when you walk in, this is going to be that beautiful language wall that Wanda has designed, that's going to have all of the Indigenous languages on it. Then that's going to be stunning. This is when you walk into the circular portion, the main part. This is going to be able to host 150 to 200 people. And upper mezzanine area, this is going to be like mainly for students to come and relax and read and study, or just to relax and chill. They need some time away. This is the basement. So you're looking at a wall. The cement wall right here is going to be gone, and you're going to be able to walk out into the garden. And this is, I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to go back. That little door there, if you can see it right there, the little strip of light there. So that whole cement wall is going to be gone. And I went and took the next picture looking at that door. So this is where the garden's going to be. So they've got that all dug up. So that's going to be our beautiful medicine garden area, covered by that beautiful arbor structure. And that's my presentation.
Thanks so much, Paula. It's great to get those current shots there. So what we're going to do to look at how this building will look, we're going to hand it over now to Tierra and Wanda to share their designs. So I'll hand it over to them.
Thank you. And what what I just wanted to share, I'll share a little bit about the process of how we got here and the sort of the big things that we were trying to achieve, as well as our engagement process. So what you see on screen, and I think this is really important for Indigenous design, right? Design is that red circle that you see there, but what comes before is all the learning that happens. So not only do we, that yellow part is where we do our internal learning to be able to understand before we get into community, what the community is about. And then the blue teal line is where we start to bring the learnings from the community to us. And it's been a remarkable process. Our outcomes you see on the end, yeah, we usually get a building out of this, but most importantly, we get this beautiful summation of everything from pictures and maps and archives and so forth that we wrap into a visual storytelling report that we think is very important in order to document these acts of reconciliation. Next slide. So there's the outside of the building, and you see the building as it was in its previous form. And I just, before Tierra presents the design that we came to, I just wanted to comment on something. You know, a lot of the First Nation students that come to universities are first generation, myself included, right? We don't have a long history of people that went to universities, and they can be quite uncomfortable, and they can be quite foreign, and it can be quite, it can feel cold and institutional. And so all the what you heard Paula talk about was, how do we make it more warm? How do we make it feel like home? And of course, for us, it's how do we connect with nature? So Tierra will walk you through our aim to make it inclusive, make it welcoming, and to bring nature to the space. Next slide. I'll just share about the engagement, and then I'll pass it to Tierra. As we went through engagement, we normally come out with a series of exercises that we have in order to be able to drill down really quickly. This was a half-day session. It doesn't take that long to engage a community. So I want to make sure that everyone understands this is a short process, but we get so much. We've been doing this for a lot of years, and so we can really quickly get to some really beautiful concepts. And what we do is we wrap those all up into what you see on the bottom, which is design drivers. What are the big pushes for this building? So for us, what we heard, the ability to bring community together, the natural world, incorporating traditions, preserving our language, all of the metaphors and associations, there are so many, and then of course to make it welcoming and warm. So with that, I will pass it to Tierra.
As Wanda has mentioned, we did an engagement with Western University, both with the staff and the students as well. We got so much information from these engagements that we had to narrow down what were those big buckets as Wanda had listed. And these are the associations that we incorporated into the design of both the inner rotunda of that building, as well as that medicinal outdoor arbor space that you'll see in our coming slides. So some of the associations were included were the turtle, snowshoes, Métis stash, longhouse, and really started looking at constellation astronomy, either through the equinox, solstice, or how do we start incorporating those constellations within the inner dome? And how do we start integrating contemporary Indigenous expression? And that was actually working with 3 artists that, that Western University had picked that were local. And you'll see their artwork incorporated into our renders. How do we start looking at the wampum belt, bringing in that natural world? And Paula had mentioned that welcome wall that you'll see in our renders as well. So the actual level, it consists of 3 levels. So we're looking at the lowest level, which is the basement level. Paula had mentioned, as you've seen from her construction images, they're digging out the earth. That is actually where it's gonna actually slope down from the main ground level down to the lower level. We're actually opening up that wall right in here to some glass walls. So it's really bringing in that light to the lower level. We'll have a general student worker area and setting. But one of the main things we have in this lower level is the smudge area and cultural teaching place. It's in a circular pattern, but this is all open right in here. We do have a render that I'll show you later on with the fireplace and really incorporating those natural elements too. And the actual rotunda, we really started not having so much rigid shapes, but still going along with those circular elements. having glass circular partitions, creating these little study spaces, places to rest, places to gather. And when we move up to the upper level, so as you see right here, we do have our gathering arbor space with that medicinal teaching garden that leads down to the lower level. We do have an entry that goes into the main rotunda. In this main gathering space, we do have a place for smudging, located right at the center, with general seating around here. But with this space, we actually started looking at how do we start bringing in the constellations and astronomy. So we started mapping out where those lines of the winter solstice and equinox will come through. What we did is started creating openings within those walls to let that light in of the equinox and solstice, and really creating these little gathering study spaces for the students with turtle inspired partitions that you'll see in the rendering. Going into the main reception area, we do have another entry at this side. We have the reception desk, and right behind the reception desk is that welcome wall. So we're looking up at the upper level right now. So right in here is open to below. And right within this floor, what we had indicated is the 4 directions. And that is differentiated by the floor patterning on each quadrant, as well as the general how the seating is chosen. And as you can see, not all the seating is the same, they are different. So that was the idea within this space. So we're looking to the renderings right now. So this is actually on the main level, looking at the reception render. With this render, we have the welcome wall with the Indigenous language saying welcome or hello. This welcome wall was really inspired by the snowshoe pattern, as you can see in the pattern right in here, and really bringing in the natural world through natural materials, making that place really warm and inviting through these warm colors of the wood. And we also incorporated, how do we bring in those natural elements of earth and fire? So one of this is actually incorporating a green wall right in here. And we really started thinking about how's artwork placed within this space. And the wall, or either that, this is actually one of the artists' artwork that was working with us as well, right on the glass, right behind here. So the next render is actually the main gathering space, still on the main level. This is a depth of information. As you can see, the solstice and equinox are indicated by floor patterning that lead up to these openings. There will be a place for smudging right at the central area. Within these small little gathering study spaces, these are partially translucent turtle dividers that will kind of hug that area right in here. And we started really looking at the incorporating the Indigenous artwork of the sky dome at this inner rim, and also indicating the 4 directions within this patterning right in here. Still keeping with the circular elements, even going up to the light fixtures. So looking down at the lower level of that smudge area and culture teachings, it is an open space, but still forming that circular element, having a fireplace, a place for smudging, and still bringing in that warm and welcome feeling through the natural materials. And again, looking at places to place the Indigenous artwork and how it's incorporated even into glass. So the last one is actually the outdoor gathering space. This is actually the Arbor Structure right in here. The Arbor Structure is really inspired by the longhouse of the paneling of how it's layered. And we got inspiration from the Métis SAS. If you look at it from a side view, it does have that symbolism, as well as the incorporation of the snowshoes with the inner structure layout. As you can see, it really lights up the space. There will be a fireplace right in the central area, and it leads down into a lower level, really opening up that space on the lower level. And As Paula mentioned, once it's full bloom, this place will be a place for teaching, learning, and just a place for students to come and relax as well. Thank you, everyone.
I just wanted to make one comment. I asked Tierra, is this the first building that she has designed that is actually getting constructed as we were presenting? And this is. This is what the IDC is about. I'm so excited.
I was really excited when Paula showed the construction images because it's like, this is actually happening. From the beginning, I was at this project from the engagements, helping Wanda synthesize all the engagement information. I've been with this project since beginning to now, and it's such amazing just to see it come to life.
Yeah, this is an exciting moment. That's great.
I'm practically speechless. I'm actually feeling very, very overwhelmed and emotional. So beautiful. So when I was in library school at Western, I actually used the library at Althouse quite a bit, partly because I love the circular shape of it. I have a real, I don't know, maybe it's just an innate, humane sort of organic attraction. You know, like many of us are drawn to water and fire. I love that library. I think it was my favorite place to study, and I loved the circular shape of it. And of course, at the time, 20 years ago, it was sort of, it had fallen a bit sort of on rough times, but it still had that cool shape. And I just thought, this is such an interesting place. And when I was studying there as a library student, there was a lot of like toys and things that people could sign out when they were learning to be teachers. So you could like sign out Lego kits and play kits and all these weird, cool toys. And I just thought, that's so much fun. Like what, you know, a library, you can go and sign out toys, but it's a university library. So thank you, Paula, for your vision and sort of the overall picture of where Western is going, with so much leadership from the Indigenous community and the people at Western who are helping to guide, hopefully, what will be a new era. It's so important and it's so overdue. And the things that Paula has talked about are really inspiring. For me as a Western alumni, but also as a donor and part of the London, you know, the greater London community, I hope that we can all sort of be part of moving this whole era forward. And to Wanda and Tierra, wow. Thank you. I mean, I've been seeing little sneak peeks and it's so beautiful. I love all of the organic materiality and sort of the opening up the walls and the windows and bringing all that sunlight into just a really unique building to begin with. And you're taking it into what I think will be a whole new, an explosive new life of just so much energy and light, and bringing in just an amazing assortment and range of community endeavors and things that can happen in that space. And I can't wait that we can actually see it in the real world. And when COVID is over and the building is finished and all of that stuff, that we all get an opportunity to see it in the real world. I guess we'll be able to see the garden before we see the indoor space. But thank you to all three of you for presenting and sharing these exciting project with us. We are going to open it up to questions now. Joanna and I guess, or Joanna, if you're good with tag teaming.
Yep.
And sort of, I haven't been keeping track of questions, so perhaps you have been.
Oh, that's quite all right. Yeah. So there was one question in the chat and someone else has answered it about where the education library is going. So we had someone answer that, which is great. So please add any questions in the chat that you like. And in the meantime, I'll keep monitoring that. But Tierra, I just wanted to ask you, given that, as Wanda said, this is the project that's coming to fruition for you, was there anything that surprised you in this process? You said you received so much information about the elements that you were using in this design, was there anything surprising that came out, whether it was a Canadian thing or some other element, and it, you know, Canadian in quotes here, but just like some other local issue from this area that surprised you in the process?
I wouldn't say nothing really surprised me, but it's starting each project. I always like the beginning because I always learn about their culture. Being an Indigenous person myself, it can always find so much commonality with another Indigenous group and that same worldview, but there's always those differences. And it's always amazing just studying like the Indigenous architecture that the traditional homesteads and artifacts and even traditional regalia. It always amazes me. And of course, we got a lot of information from this project alone, and we're just seeing how everything's incorporated into that design. It's definitely an amazing process.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah. And the other thing I was wondering in looking at those designs, your process of taking elements like the Métis sash, the longhouses, the snowshoes, were you finding that the mechanics of it, the design was difficult to achieve those looks just based on how the materials had to move, or was there anything special that you had to do to incorporate those shapes?
Well, this wasn't our first iteration and we stuck with it. There was a lot of iterations of that outdoor arbor space. Our first game was at a much larger scale, and it got scaled down and more better refined and more simplified. And it's not making a little of there's certain artifacts or structures and how that can be incorporated in.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. All right.
I have a quick question actually about the outdoor arbor structure. What is it made of? It looks like wood. Is what is it constructed of?
The outer brim is more wood, but the inner is like those steel structure with like a paneling on top.
Okay. Okay.
And again, we were looking at copper. You know, we look at materiality of what has cultural meaning of every region, and we found out that copper, that used to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be the vessels that they would put water of the region, and it had a purifying effect. And I think it's a really powerful, just that story alone. And so a lot of things get value engineered out, so we don't always get the material that we want, but that's what we ideally wanted copper, but I think we might have had to value engineer it. It might be a coated metal now. We always reach for the stars, and then we're somewhere in between when we get to the final product.
Well, copper is still used. Copper came up a lot at the early days of COVID because we were talking about water safety, and of course copper pipes were very much the traditional use for water pipes, but again, value engineered out.
I know.
But
and
good to dream.
I'm continuing just to look for questions, so please share them whenever you're ready. But I wanted to ask the same question to Wanda about anything that you learned during this project, or still learning.
Oh, we're always learning. I think this is, you know, what a blessing of a job that we have as architects. And I'm going to get emotional. Oh, sorry. To go around to all these different nations and to learn about their culture. It is such a blessing. I cannot describe to you how precious this job feels to us, right? Because we're not only learning from our own elders, we're learning from everyone's elders. Like, what a tremendous gift. Like, yeah. So there you go. It's a beautiful, beautiful career. So if there's any aspiring Indigenous architects out there, come to us. Join us at the IDC and you'll have a job for life.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a wonderful benefit of the process that you described of Indigenous design, the fact that it's built in, that it is engaging and that it is part of that learning. Indeed. Yeah. So Paula, anything that comes up for you as you see those drawings, as you see what it will be? I know you were saying you were excited about the garden, but is there anything else that's standing out for you that you're excited to see?
Yeah, the arbor. When they first initially presented that to us, we were all Oh, like just so excited. It's funny though that when you talk about what the inspirations were for you when you were creating it, when we first looked at it, we saw a turtle shell. And your inspirations don't mention anything about a turtle. And I think it's just in the eye of the beholder, I guess, like what we see and what's important, or I don't know, not really important, but relevant, I guess. I'm not too sure, but all of those things that you were inspired by are important to us. But that's what we saw was a turtle shell, and we have to have that.
Well, and I think that was an early rendition. We were emulating a turtle. It used to be a lot bigger, that arbor. Again, we value engineered the size of it out. But I think Paula brings up a really good point, that there's this sort of a layering in Indigenous design where you're trying to bring all of these associations in, so all the people have something that they connect to. And I think this is the most important thing that we can do, is really stitching back the associations with the meaning that are so personal to so many people across Turtle Island. Yeah.
This actually reminds me what we're just talking about, like how different people see different representations. We had Brian Porter speaking 2 weeks ago, talking about the new Indigenous Family and Childcare Center he designed and is being built here in London. And he talked about some of the images that people had said, oh, it reminds me of ... And he put up all of these sort of icons, and there was turtles and butterflies and fish. And it was really interesting. And he said, really, it's all of those things, right? Because we all sort of interpret and we see different things, but in a beautiful way, it incorporates all of those things. When I actually saw the arbor, it made me think of the Indigenous people from I think it's Vancouver Island, who have the straw sort of hats. Is that, yeah? And that's the first thing that popped into my mind. So there's many different, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we do have 2 questions in the chat. So I see we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask those, and then we can bring a close to our session. But I'll start with the question here about the smudging area. So the question is about smoke alarms. The smoke needs to pervade in smudging, but how do you circumvent safety systems is the question.
A good question. And what we do is we note where the smudging will happen. And I often tell our mechanical engineer, it's a small amount of smoke. It's not, there's no big puff of cloud. It's quite small and quite tiny. And I've done it and didn't set off alarms, even if we didn't up the mechanical in that room. But what we'll do is we'll select rooms in the facility, and we'll pull that air, put a lot more airflow. And it's very tiny, so no issue at all. Great question.
And so we have another one here too. And the comment is a wonderful project and presentation and space. And the person is asking, as a physician and a psychiatrist working with patients, families, and providers together to transform healthcare, what I'm struck by is the potential of this as a healing space, a place that holds community in its hands. So I just wanted to share that comment. And I'll just share another question that just came in here. We have a few more. Okay, so we're just going to go a few minutes. If you need to leave, please do. As I mentioned, this is being recorded, but while we have everyone here, let's just do these last 2 questions. Can Wanda explain the characteristics of Indigenous architecture and how the procedures differ from standard Western architectural procedures? This might be a whole lecture, Wanda. I don't know.
Right. Well, I think and there's a beautiful article by Hirini Matunga, who's a New Zealand scholar, who just provided a 7-part definition of Indigenous architecture. Please look me up. I'm going to send you that article, because now it's a formula and anyone now can do Indigenous architecture if you meet those 7 criteria, but it's really about creating meaning, right, for the local community. So that's why we go in there with 2 ears open. We listen for 90% of the time that we're in community. We're just there to learn, because it's different for every community. But I think what comes out of this is new meaning for architecture, new methods, ways of doing architecture that are more collaborative, and new responsibilities, right? For the earth and for our collective land family, including all of us. Great question. Thank you. And email me.
Thanks, Wanda. So a question about dancing. Would dancing happen indoors or outdoors?
It would
I'll
be
leave that to
both.
Paula.
Yeah, so the larger gathering space would be suitable for round dancing or socials, Haudenosaunee socials. And then we also have some of the outdoor space available to us as well. So yep, dancing indoors and outdoors.
Great, thank you. All right, there's a comment here. Okay, very good. Sandra, did you want to add something?
No, I just noticed there was an earlier question I think might have gotten missed. Someone is asking, they said, I'm teaching art history to interior design students. Very difficult to find contemporary Indigenous architects and designers to teach. And I'm wondering if you, I'm assuming meeting our lovely guest panelists, could share some links to Indigenous designers and we can pass those along. I'm not sure how best to that, but
I can email.
Yes. Yeah, and we're doing a lecture on Indigenous interior design. We have an interior designer on staff and we're doing that. What is the event? It's October 9th.
It's October 9th.
And the New York's Interior School of Design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can sign up. Where can we sign up?
I can send the link to Joanna. I'm not too sure if she has the emails for everybody on our Zoom conference, and then she can send that out.
Great, will do. Thanks, Tierra, and thanks, Sandra. I did miss that one. Thank you for that. Perfect. Okay, so I will send that link to all the registrants, and if you don't get it, then you have my contact information there too. So with that, I see we're a few minutes over, but I just wanted to thank everyone for their questions and to thank everyone here. So what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Sandra for the final thank you.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Wanda. Thank you, Tierra, for coming to us from your very diverse geographic locations and for sharing together this really inspiring and exciting project, the vision and the passion that's gone into it and that continues to go into it. I think I speak for everyone when I say we're really excited to see it coming to life and we're really excited to see it in person. So thank you for spending this time with us and for sharing that with us. Hopefully, as I said, we'll be able to see it in person in the summer or the spring, COVID and everything else, whatever. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. The films and the present, as I mentioned earlier, Joanna and I mentioned this is the 10th year that we've done this MidMod series. And the films and the presentations that I chose this year they were chosen very specifically. I always try and choose films from around the world and get as diverse a perspective as possible. But as Wanda alluded, and as many of you probably know, architecture tends to be a very male and a very white domain. So I always try to find as diverse a range of films as I can and occasional speakers. So the films and presentations that we presented this year were chosen very specifically and deliberately. And I wanted to open up a long overdue learning process and appreciation and a discussion about underrepresented Indigenous and Black, especially, accomplishments and contributions to the built environment that we all inhabit. Obviously not just here in London, but across the world. So I encourage everyone to watch, there's a new documentary film called From Earth to Sky, which explores the work of many Indigenous architects from across Turtle Island, including Wanda, who is one of the featured architects, and our first event speaker, Brian Porter, is also in there. It's a really wonderful film. It's just gorgeous. I've seen it 3 times. It's so beautiful. It's really inspiring, and it's sort of, it'll make you think, well, why don't we just build everything this way? What are we doing? Come on. So Joanna, I believe, is going to add the link into the chat. You can find it on the TVO website and on the TVO YouTube channel. So again, think about the world that we live in and the world that we build and how we can make it more sustainable, more earth friendly, more people friendly, and more open to diverse voices and visions. I want to thank everyone for enjoying and attending these unconventional events that we've done this year. We had 2 outdoor film screenings. That was a first for the library. It continues to be an unpredictable year. Hopefully we're towards the end of this, whatever this is, this wild ride of a pandemic. Hopefully next year we'll be back to screening a full roster of films and having speakers again in person. Huge thanks to Joanna, who has just been incredible. She made all my crazy ideas come to life. And Ben, who is not here with us tonight, but he was our AV tech and made everything just work so smoothly. So you can always watch really good quality architecture and design films on Canopy, even if you're not in London. Canopy, the Canopy film streaming service is available through a lot of local public libraries, including London Public Library. And you sign in with your library card and they have a phenomenal collection of films. So back to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Sandra. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to our speakers for giving your time, your energy, and for everyone, just for being open to receiving this information and engaging with it. And for those in London, for coming to see this space as it takes shape. So a very good night to everyone. Thank you so, so much for your time. Okay, good night.